to please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend on you, he says, all who spend in good cause. Good deeds are opportunities, sparkling bright and true, raising you in the sight of Allah and adorning Al-Jannah for you. So rush to earn his reward. Don't forget the oppressed. And when you go to sleep.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome to another episode of A Time to Please Allah. I'm your host, Gabriel Al-Romaani, and alhamdulillah, I hope that you have enjoyed your week, and I hope that you've used your time wisely. And just remember, it's always a good time to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not just this hour on Thursday night from 8 to 9 p.m. UAE time. Every hour that you can, try to, inshallah, benefit yourself, and inshallah use it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I just want to remind you this is a live show, inshallah, so our number is on the screen. You can call in and participate. Also, go back to our Facebook page and you can check out our previous episodes, or you can just Google A Time to Please Allah and you find all the information, all the videos, timings and so on. Alhamdulillah, we always try to bring you an interesting spin on things, and we try to bring you interesting shows, interesting topics. And today we decided, actually for quite a while, for last time, that my dear respected brother Muhammad Tim Humble was with us. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We decided to speak about a very important topic, actually, that some people don't pay attention to. You know, as Muslims, we think that, alhamdulillah, you know, we're Muslims, we're safe, you know, we're the only ones giving da'wah, and people are entering Islam. We talked about the scientific, you know, miracles and how those are used in the da'wah and so on. So, you know, we're very much onto the YouTube hype and 100 people entering Islam, 400 people entering Islam. I don't know how many people entering Islam. We love the debates, we love the discussions. A lot of people are very much into that. But a lot of people don't understand that Islam is also under attack. And with the advent of, you know, social media and the internet, and, you know, we live in an information, era, a lot of people are using these avenues to attack Islam. A lot of organizations out there, a lot of missionary work that's done, be it from different religions actually, and even non-religious groups that are spending a lot of effort and resources on trying to get people away from Islam, or at least to paralyze them, you know, to put these intellectual doubts into them. And, you know, you meet a lot of these Muslims who have been affected by such intellectual doubts. They say, yeah, I'm a Muslim, but, you know, I don't really agree with this, I don't really agree with certain aspects of Islam, but I'm a Muslim. So, you know, this person might pray Jummah once in a while just for the sake of it, you know, because maybe the parents or the culture. But at the core, you know, they don't really have yaqeen in Islam. And that just paralyzed them. They're not going to benefit the ummah. They're not going to help, you know, Islam whatsoever. I know that, mashallah, part of your studies was dealing with some of these shubahat, or these doubts that some of the missionaries raise. So let's start with maybe giving us some background on that, on what you've done.
Yeah, sure. I mean, just to touch on the topic you mentioned, just the introduction, something came to mind, or two stories came to mind. One was that of late, just, you know, here in the UAE, I've been dealing with several cases of people who have left Islam, gone to atheism. And it's not just one case. I mean, it's like it's becoming a pattern. And these were not people who got to that stage on their own. These are people who there were people involved in either planting seeds of doubt, either, you know, and sometimes very subtly, sometimes just education, you know, just sitting and listening to a teacher teach you about biology, and just sowing seeds of doubt, you know, in religion in general, and then Islam specifically. But one thing that really struck me is an email I just received a couple of days ago from someone who said, I've seen a video, I've been shown a video on YouTube, and you know, I'm the last person to watch anything on YouTube, so I have no idea how popular this video is. But it's by an atheist missionary. And it shows somebody reciting what appears to be the Quran in a very beautiful, very emotional, very sort of like heart sort of affecting sort of voice. But of course, it's complete gibberish what they're saying. It could be, you know, it's just random poetry or words in Arabic or just, you know, sort of nonsensical words.
Right.
And the purpose behind this is to make Muslims think it's the Quran, get really emotional, get really like, wow, that's the most beautiful recitation I've ever heard. And then hear the guy just turn up at the end and say, what you are listening to is complete nonsense. It was just somebody reciting random words. And, you know, there's no such thing as affecting your iman. And there's no, you know, when you're listening to Quran, you're just listening to the person's voice. There's no, and, you know, okay, it doesn't work with Arabic speakers, but it does target those people. And that's just two stories, anecdotal stories of just in this week that I've dealt with in this last 2 weeks. So it's a big problem.
Can I ask you, were these born Muslims or reverts?
These were born Muslims.
SubhanAllah.
These are born Muslims. Reverts, you can understand a little bit. You can see the process, because you can see why someone might come into Islam maybe for the wrong reason, might be a little bit unstable, and then might drop out, or why someone might just find the obstacles too much to bear.
Right.
You can kind of see how that pans out. But to see a born Muslim who, you know, comes to you, and to have parents come to you crying and saying that my child no longer believes in Islam anymore, and my child no longer thinks that, you know, Islam is the truth, and this is why, that is like, it's an eye-opener to people who are not aware of it. And I mean, as we say, this is something I've got a history of studying, and I think it started probably with new Muslims and thinking about, you know, that we have all these wonderful statistics of Islam being the fastest growing religion in the world, and all these people entering into Islam. And the reality is, unfortunately, that there's a huge number leaving, an absolutely massive number.
No doubt.
And I don't want to put a number on that and say it's a certain percentage or a certain 1,000 or 100,000 or whatever, but it's a large number of people. It's large enough to be statistically significant number of people leaving Islam. And I think that that's something we have to be aware of. And when I was in Medina, I felt, you know, I was asked to do a dissertation to complete my studies. And one of the topics, everyone, you know, dissertations are horrible things. You know, pick a topic and everyone picks the same topic, and then you have to argue with your supervisor to get it approved. And, you know, it was kind of like, I thought, what can I do that's just totally different? And I had to do it on the topic of hadith. And one of the things that had interested me is some of the anti-Islamic websites that were around, that were propagating sort of Christian missionaries, propagating anti-Islamic rhetoric. And actually the first time I ever saw these websites was when I was looking to become Muslim. You know, I was 14 years old and I was looking to become Muslim. I came across these websites as I was searching about Islam, and I quickly dismissed them, but I kind of came back to that while I was in Medina, of sort of, okay, let's have a look and see how this pans out. And I ended up doing a dissertation on the topic of how Christian missionaries, and two particular Christian missionaries, use hadith in order to propagate their sort of anti-Islamic rhetoric, and why. And we did a bit of an analysis on that, and it was it was very interesting. It was eye-opening, really. And you know, the conclusion was great, because, you know, in a conclusion, it made me feel like I understood the mechanism these people use a lot better, and that there was a mechanism, there was a system, there was, you know, I mean, it made you feel more confident in yourself, that you understood how it works, but it also made you feel really worried, you know, as to how many people are being affected by this. And it's not these crazy missionaries that I really worry about. It's the biology teacher who basically just spends an entire term just chipping away at someone's concept of the universe until they no longer believe in God. That scares me more than, you know, a Zakaria Potros or someone like that.
Correct.
You know, like, it scares me more, you know, to be brutally honest. But, you know, at the end of the day, when we see what's being done, I think it's important that Muslims open their eyes to what's really going on in the world.
Right. So it seems that we have two types of missionaries. You have the religious missionaries, which are Christians. I've seen work being done from the Hindu side as well, and Jewish. But then you have, as you said, the atheists, which is a greater threat in our time right now, because they're really very strong. They're very, as you said, they hit at the core of the belief. You know, with a Christian, you can say, like, look, you know, there's a lot of insults and a lot of, you know, twisting of things. So a smart person, as you said, can dismiss, you know, these things as a whole. You know, you can just blanket it. This is rubbish. Of course, there's a lot of people who are confused by them, but you know, in reality, it's rubbish. But on the other side, when someone hits you with, you know, evolution or something like that, right? The concept of universe, the Big Bang, it's really, you know, it's very convincing, right? Because the whole world seems to be, you know, technology and everything, development, it seems to point somehow in the way. It seems that there's almost a trend of technology to point towards that. And as you received emails, I received an email some time ago from a sister, and you know, she was saying that same thing. She's part of you know, she's taking a class at university, and the professor, you know, confused them. You know, that she's just confused. She's basically ready to leave Islam if she doesn't find the answers to question number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These questions were very, very deep, and it required a lot of elaboration. You know, issues of, you know, the species developing, okay, and how some species, for example, their genomes and their DNAs are very, you know, closely related, right? Like, for example, monkeys and humans, right? So things that, you know, really can shake you, you know, right? So what I did is, it was interesting because I didn't answer her questions. All I said is that this is said by a scientist, right? She said yes. So I said, so you give this person authority because of who they are as a scientist, right? And she said yes. So I said, okay. So I brought her other scientists, which are called creationists, you know. Have you seen this? There's a whole new trend, right? So I showed her some, you know, people who are not Muslim who, you know, basically refuse and refute evolution, but they say that, you know, there has to be a God. You know, it's just, actually the universe points towards that. You know, so it was interesting because, alhamdulillah, for that particular case, she was able to, you know, just flip it on. It was like, and she was just shocked. She's like, how come? I almost lost my faith. You know, look at these, you know, because this is very, very subtle. You know, you can't catch it. At least it's not an issue of answering the question. It's not an issue of refuting every single point. It's the concept, you know, and how they package it. And this is why it's just so dangerous, subhanAllah. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I had a few points. I've recently been editing a book on the topic of refuting evolution by a doctor from the UK, and it's very, very, very well written. It's very well organized in terms of it's not deeply scientific, but just pointing out where fact and theory or fact and fiction get very easily blurred. And I'll just give one example, so we don't have time to talk about evolution all night, but just one example. One of the most convincing elements of the theory of evolution are these pictures you get of this sort of monkey, and then you get like a sort of slightly bent monkey, and then you get like a slightly sort of standing monkey, and then you get one that's like now stands up and it's getting less and less hair and whatever. And these pictures basically captured the public imagination. And there's a lot of sort of proof that, I'm talking about the Western non-Muslim population, were pretty much convinced, not by theory, but by 4 pictures that were drawn by an artist that have absolutely no scientific evidence at all. And when I say at all, I mean zero, zilch, nothing, no fossil record, nothing at all. They are simply an artist who was told about the theory of evolution and was told, draw it for people in a way they can understand, because they can't understand the genes and the development and natural selection and survival of the fittest. It's all too complicated. Just draw them some pictures of a monkey turning into a human, which has absolutely no evidence for it whatsoever. And it really struck me as just how much something can be portrayed as a fact when you actually drill down to it, there's no fact at all. You have a theory, you have a presumption of fact, you have a presumption of proof. And you know, even if you were to get a staunch evolutionist and put them on the spot and say, okay, let's talk about a change of kind. Let's talk about a fish turning into a reptile. Let's talk about a reptile turning into a bird. Have you got any evidence of this at all? They would say no, but we will have. Their basic answer, once they get out from lying and they start telling the truth, will be, no, we don't have any evidence for this, but we believe that in the near future we will be able to prove that this is the case. That's not fact.
That's not fact.
that is not a fact. And that's one thing that, if we're just talking about principles that missionaries use, one principle, and I think evolution's a beautiful example of this, is blurring the line between fact and fiction.
Of course.
Taking something which is a fact and, let's say, call it microevolution,
Right.
or talk about like small changes, people getting slightly taller, getting, slightly the skin color changing, things that are pretty well understood, and things that have been reproduced in laboratories all over the world. In terms of, I was listening to a very, very, very good speech by a evolutionary biologist who happened to be a creationist, and he actually has been growing all these billions and billions, trillions of bacteria in the lab and trying to make them evolve. So, there's certain things that have been shown, and certain things have been well reproduced, of this sort of one-step change, and little changes that involve within the same sort of kind, within the same species, of just something getting, its nose gets a bit longer, or it's it gets a bit more hairy, it gets a bit lighter, a bit darker. But something changing into something else, yeah, that's just blurring the line. That's just taking the paintbrush and just blurring the line between fact and fiction, and presenting it all as
a
fact.
But that's an amazing thing. It's actually it's almost as it's a tactic, because if you are to separate all these things as individual arguments, right, but they put it together as a package under the theory of evolution. If you were to look, for example, at if there's any intermediary stages of a certain species transforming to another one, this is missing. This is the biggest and the weakest link that they have. Even if, theoretically speaking, a bacteria would mutate, that is not proof for humans that humans have, the great apes as their ancestors, that humans and monkeys have the same ancestors. This is the funny thing, that they always somehow, in the end, what's the purpose? It's not for them to prove that bacteria can mutate or that DNA can change. It's that there's no God. That God did not create men as we know. That's what they want to get to, at the end of the day.
And the strangest thing about that is that even if we were to take the theory of evolution as the truth, which of course it's not, but even if we were to take it as the truth, that would be even further evidence for the existence of God. Because it shows that these things are not, and let's be honest, survival of the fittest just doesn't work. Because let's just take, for example, the tree shrew. You have a shrew that climbs up the tree. At what point does it become beneficial to grow wings?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. There's no reason to do that, except if that were a part of a greater plan. So when you even look at even those people who believe in evolution, the fact that it's been packaged so much with atheism, and the fact that in some ways it was developed in order to combat the Christian church, and in order to pull people away from the church as an institution, and probably it was a bit of revenge for the church's bad treatment of scientists, in the sort of the period prior to that. At the end of the day, you see the way that it's packaged together with atheism is just, it doesn't make any sense, because even if you believed in the theory is in of itself, it would still suggest that this theory is being propagated, or that this process is being driven by intelligent design. It's not random, because the changes just don't, they take too long to happen, and they're too deliberate, for it to be something that is random. And of course the theory itself falls apart in any case, but you just challenge some of the presumptions behind it. And I think that's one of the things that you see from missionaries in general across the spectrum, atheist, Christian, all of it, is this blurring of fact and fiction. And that's what we call a shubha in Arabic, because a shubha comes from the word shebah, and that is something that has a resemblance to the truth. So at the end of the day, if we look at monkeys and human beings, they have a lot of common DNA. But so does pretty much every other living thing.
A pig has very close DNA to the human being.
We talk about this common DNA, and that's the shebah. That's the similarity with the truth. You have something that you can imagine how a monkey would turn into a human being. You can sort of visualize how that might happen, and that's your bait that reels you into a theory that has absolutely no evidence for it whatsoever.
Moving on to the other side, the other group, the religious missionaries. Maybe we're gonna talk really science. Subhanallah, it's dangerous. But when someone breaks it apart and really and I think we need to have more of that. And there are mashallah some brothers who are I think working at that really hard. And alhamdulillah, I love that there are non-Muslims who are also really contributing to this. But some of the group that I had most exposure to were the religious missionaries. And as we said at the beginning, that this is, their arguments are usually rubbish, but they can really hook people who are looking for the truth, who have a desire for faith, who have been raised in religion, and they're always looking for God, These are people who you can tell them 100 stories about evolution, they will still never believe it, because they have faith in them, and they're looking for the correct way. And I remember when I became Muslim, that was my first exposure within the first few months, stumbling upon some of these websites and people directing me towards them. And actually, what I do right now, it's actually due to that. We're talking about 12, 13 years ago, when I actually was directed towards these websites and say, look, you should read this. And I actually started reading it. The damage that it did to me personally. The doubts that I had. Did I do the right choice? Look at what they're saying. And not knowing, not having read the Quran even once yet. Not knowing any Arabic. Having no clue of the fundamentals of Islam. You know what I mean? Because that's the thing. They set up the premise, and you're basically in their field, on their territory. So you have to play by their rules. But you have no clue that you're in their field and their territory. So I remember at some days that I myself was contemplating if I did the right choice or not. Really strong doubts. And not just that, as I was talking at the beginning, the paralysis that comes with it when it comes to faith, when it comes to you practicing your prayers and so on, They're just like, and the shaitan, we forget about this. We think everything is just an intellectual, exercise. It's not. The shaitan is there, and he knows, and he's waiting, and he will help. He'll make sure that you stick to that, and you gotta keep going deeper and deeper, and he's gonna keep whispering to you. And it was only by the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I remember, going through these things, and I was just, I found, I had very little knowledge of them. I found one mistake. There was, one thing that they missed that really opened my eyes. And that was, why do they use different translations of the Quran within the same article? I didn't know anything else. All the hadiths were somehow matching. Everything was matching. But then I caught that the translations are not the same. Within the same article, Yusuf Ali, Piqtal, Muhammad Muhsin Khan, and I said, why 3 translations within our article? Then I checked. Then I realized, I went to another one, because that translation was not given, it was not fitting. Then I realized that, there's something wrong here. That gave me almost a rule to dismiss everything. I said, I don't know, I can't answer, but I know these people are messing around.
And that's a really good point. Because I think if we're going to start this discussion and people are talking about practical tips at home, your first tip is to hold on to the concept that these people are not telling you the truth. And that Islam is the truth. And Islam is the truth. Your faith is enough. And I'm not talking about those tiny percentage of people who really are right now in the stage of doubt. Those people need a bit of convincing. I'm talking about your average Muslim. You know that Islam is the truth. You know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you to worship you, and you have that basic premise. If someone comes to you and says to you, Islam allows something really horrible, like Islam allows, they talk about slavery and, a lot of little, a lot of like sort of things they'll bring up in modern day terms, and they say something to shock you, and you immediately defend Islam and say, of course, that's not true, Islam doesn't say that. And then they come with the counterpunch, which is that they then prove to you that Islam does say that. The first thing you have to hold on to is you have to hold on to the basic root of your faith, that Islam is telling you the truth, that the Quran doesn't contradict, that there's nothing evil in Islam, there's nothing oppressive in Islam, but also to recognize that you don't know the answer at that point. And if you think that you know the answer to everything they're going to throw at you, you will end up getting really badly hit, and you can get hit so badly you could end up leaving Islam.
Yes.
That you have to recognize that we all have a limit to our knowledge. They will throw a hadith at you have not heard. Your first response will be, that hadith must be fabricated, until you find out the hadith in Sahih Muslim.
Yes.
In which case you realize that, okay, this requires a little bit more. So we're not saying that, we're saying that you should have an initial defense that says to you that, okay, hold on a second. This guy's trying to convert me to Christianity. What is he trying to convert me to?
True, exactly. It's very
Like,
important.
okay, let's be honest. Okay, Islam allows whatever, slavery
Yeah,
and
sure.
killing
Yeah.
and,
No problem.
marrying children, all that stuff, and honor killing and whatever.
Right.
But what is the conclusion of that? The conclusion of that is that he wants you to worship a human being,
Yes.
and to believe that God
It's
died
a
on the cross.
triune, whatever that no one can understand.
That is the conclusion of it. And once you see the bigger picture, that hold on a second, whatever he's saying about Islam, he's not saying that Islam believes that Allah died
Right.
for 3 days and came back to life.
Right.
Whatever he's telling you that, he's telling you in some of the masail of fiqh, some of the, mu'amalat, some of the, rulings of war or whatever. But he's not, rarely, and I won't say never, but rarely attacking you in your concept of God to begin with.
Yes,
They don't begin by saying, hey, you shouldn't worship one God, you should worship three, it's so
Right.
much better. Instead, they begin by saying, is Islam fair? And you say yes. And they say, well, how is it that Islam gives twice the inheritance to a man than what it gives to a woman? And you say, what do you mean? No, it doesn't. That's ridiculous. And then he brings you an ayah from the Quran.
Right.
And at this point, you're thinking, and he's taking you in stages. This missionary is taking you in steps to get to the point where he can begin you to question your concept of God. But at the beginning, he's not going to do that. At the beginning, the concept of God is not up for discussion, because basically he's selling you an inferior product, an inferior concept. And so what you have to do is you have to recognize where it's going, what the ultimate end to that is. And once you do that, you see that you're being set up. And then you have to implement this principle. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of the remembrance if you don't know. You have to go back to someone of knowledge and say to them, okay, put my brain on hold for a few days, just keep on doing what I'm doing, and ask somebody, and be confident there is an answer. And when the answer comes, you think, that was easy. And you see some of the tricks they use, and you realize it's all smoke and mirrors. And it's very much like the smoke and mirrors employed by tricksters and by illusionists. When you look at it, it looks so real. But when you see how they did it, it's just smoke and mirrors, like using multiple translations, like inserting words, certain words that they can then later on claim that, I was just giving you context, I didn't, and not relying on Arabic text, relying on other languages which they have more flexibility to sort of retranslate and interpret, and relying on some fabricated narrations and some things that are abrogated, and one of the things I saw them do a lot is mixing of things.
Yes.
It's not the case that they come to you and say to you, here's a fabricated hadith. But they'll take a hadith, they'll take something else and something else and something else and something else, something abrogated and a fabricated hadith, something that is an area of disagreement among the scholars, and they'll mix all of them together and give you something that just leads you to complete confusion. And when you break it into
Muslim,
exactly,
together,
and when you break it down into tiny little pieces and you unravel the knot, what you see is that you've just been given something that you think that, how was I ever fooled by that?
It's amazing how what you said. That's exactly how they start. They'll start with something that will plant the seed of doubt. As you said, Islam is not fair, or Islam is oppressive towards women. They'll give you the proof, right? And then they'll slowly break down that, your faith in the fairness of Islam, or and I want to talk about that in a bit, because it's something different. But then once they've destroyed that, that's when they say, but in our religion, look, God, love, and they start, bringing these emotional things. So they've tore down, as you said, something from fiqh, or something, some kind of a ruling, and then they'll hit you that, no, look, in Christianity, Jesus loves you, or Jesus, loves everyone, and this is the fair everyone. And actually, most of the times they're talking from their own minds. It's not even from their religion, you know. But a lot of people don't understand that. They think they'll quote something out of context from their own book to justify, to show that somehow Christianity or any other religion is much better than Islam. You know, they always have this Jesus versus Muhammad, you know, or you know, these lists, you know, Jesus did this and Muhammad did that and Jesus did this and Muhammad. So which one is better, you know? Kind of like when the people are like, oh, they're confused, you know. Jesus said, you know, love your enemy. Muhammad said, you know, fight them till, you know, there's no more, you know, religion. It's only for Allah. These kind of things, right? They're experts actually, and people need to understand that these are not haphazard. They have manuals of procedures. You're talking here about hundreds of years of things being put together, starting with the first translation of the Quran, which was deliberately, subhanAllah, look at this, just the word Allah was translated into Latin as a word that means a pagan, an idol, basically. So if I would read, I would say that, Kul huwa Allahu ahad, say the idol is one, or something, you know, that's what it would translate as, you know. So it was a deliberate. So imagine at that time, that was the only translation. Not just that, most of the translations came based from the Latin after that, or from that translation. So all of them translated the same, you know, type of mistake, you know, which was deliberately done. So these are tricks, and they're not, you know, someone who just kind of says, oh, I'm gonna. They actually sit down and plan these things. I found manuals of procedures of how, where to go, where to hit. You know, what kind of Muslim are you dealing with? First of all, what kind of, you know, is this a Sufi, this or that, or Salafi, or what, you know? And they, you know, they'll know where to hit with, you know, even the type of, you know, the Muslims, subhanAllah, you know, which is something amazing if you really get deep in it. Anyway, we're going to take a short break, inshallah. We'll be right back after this.
Allah, a chance to gain reward I will spend on you, he says.
TV commercials motivate viewers into immediate action and to sway consumer loyalty from one brand or service to the other. That's why we're here for you, to help you sell your products and services by using creative ideas that bring life into your own TV commercial. Advertise your business and branded products and services on Huda TV. We will offer you fast-paced and energetic 30-second affordable TV spots. Advertise on Huda TV. Acquire fresh customers and stay within your budget. For more info or to receive a quote, please send your inquiries to advert@Huda TV. Huda TV.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. قالوا أجئتنا لتأفكنا عن آلهتنا فأتنا بما تعدنا إن كنت من الصادقين. له ملك السماوات والأرض وإلى الله ترجع الأمور.
فلما رأوه عارضا مستقبل أوديتهم قالوا هذا عارض ممطرنا بل هو ما استعجلتم به.
أخا عاد إذ أنذر قومه بالأحقاف وقد خلت النذر من بين يديه ومن خلفه ألا تعبدوا إلا الله إني أخاف عليكم عذاب يوم عظيم.
فيهما عينان نضاختان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. فيهما فاكهة ونخل ورمان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان.
Sent from Allah to an angel then to man. That man was
was Muhammad, the best of creation.
A time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend on you, he said.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back. And if you're just joining us right now, as we said before, this is a live show. The number's on the screen. And we're discussing the issue of missionaries and people who are trying to plant doubts, and they're working really hard to confuse Muslims and to actually try to take them out of Islam. And I'm joined again by Muhammad Ibn Humble. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu wa rahmatullahi.
So we're left off talking about the techniques that they use, and we said that these are not haphazard; they're actually planned, and they know what they're doing. What's next? What's something of importance that we said just before the break, or during the break? We're talking that they really push this ex-Muslim. I was an ex-Muslim, and because of this, somehow I have authority. And this is very, very dangerous, because it's quite interesting when you meet someone and they're like, I was a Muslim. You're like, oh, okay, why? And he's like, I left Islam. And you kind of want to know why, and at the same time, you have to know that this person is not ignorant. He knows exactly what he will hit you with, right? But they use this as some kind of as I said, as a selling point. I used to be a Muslim. Now you find some claims that I used to be a scholar of Islam. And the funniest one that I can never forget, that this person saying, I used to study Sharia, he said. He was trying to say Sharia. And as soon as you're like, what's that? He used to study Sharia like a drink or something, or what? But subhanAllah, these people have, they won't stop at anything. And this is very seldom that I come upon a proper Christian or other religion who's actually genuine in their arguments, right? Being academically honest. Most of them are academically dishonest. And what's funny, that sometimes they argue amongst themselves. And I think these things have to be highlighted within the Muslim Ummah, who are, always actually these days on YouTube and on social media, and they're being bombarded with these things. I think more work has to be done in this.
Absolutely. I think there's a whole host of things to raise on that issue. First of all, with regard to just the last point you made of people being on social media, the danger I've seen of late is, like we said, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge. But the problem is that when you're on the internet, that your children on the internet don't have people of knowledge to ask.
Right.
Either they're going to Google it, and they're going to get, basically, they could get whatever Google throws back at them, in terms of, might be the right answer, the wrong answer, it could be, whatever. Or they're not going to be able to check it at all.
Right.
And these subtle influences are just going to be bombarded. And the last case of atheism I had was someone who was young, who had just been bombarded on social media, on YouTube, with just point after point after point after point after point. No one point seemed to change them, but the constantly being bombarded, along with their desires, along with the shaitan kind of pushing them in that direction, just made them no longer connect. And once they dropped that connection, it was very easy for the missionary to come along and finish off the job.
What's interesting, a lot of time it starts as a dawah project. These Muslims, they have the intention, I want to give dawah. They start being, commenting on videos and posts, and then that's when they get hit.
And I think there's one massive lesson we can take from that, and that is to be a Muslim missionary or a Muslim da'iyah, do not copy the methods or try to compete with the Christian missionaries and the atheist missionaries.
Very important point.
It just doesn't work. That's not how we give da'wah.
Yes.
And I mean, we talked about da'wah in our last show that we did together. It's been a while back now, a couple of months. And then I also did, since then, I've done a YouTube video on how to give da'wah, which again, people can watch. And all of it, we're talking about Islam has a unique way of giving da'wah, which is just nothing like the way these people do it. You know, these people, it's built upon deceit, it's built upon lying, it's built upon changing meanings, it's built upon manipulating people. upon bringing forward arguments that the person doesn't believe in.
Right.
You know, like that. You know, I mean, you see them literally. See a missionary say, I doubt the Trinity too. You know, like they'll say anything to get you to think, oh wow, you know, this guy's really sincere.
Right,
you know,
right.
like I've doubted the Trinity, and you know, like I also don't believe that in this, and I believe that God is one, and we'll find the truth together. But at the end of the day, it's all just designed to lead you to a certain conclusion, and that's something that people have to be aware of, just how much that people's children and you know, sort of vulnerable people can be influenced by that stream of stuff on social media, and how people manipulate others. It's really scary. And really, if the only thing that we do today is just open people's eyes. Don't go looking for it. Don't go copying what these people are doing. Don't go searching for the websites we're talking about. Don't open your mind to that. But be aware that these things exist so that you can combat them. And be aware that, you know, when these people are reaching out to you, it's not because they're really sincere about listening to your arguments. It's because, you know, sometimes you're dealing with someone who really knows their stuff. We're talking about ex-Muslims. And these ex-Muslims are a whole bunch of people. Some of them are not ex-Muslims at all.
Right.
Some of them have never practiced Islam. So when you ask them, you know, ex-Muslim, what do you mean? You say, well, you know, my father was a Muslim and I was raised from birth as a Christian. So how exactly does that make you an ex-Muslim then? You know, it is literally just, you know, you'll get someone from Nigeria or something. Mother's a Christian, father's a Muslim. Father left before he was born, and he'll give this whole I was an ex-Muslim type thing. You get some people who have been through some pretty horrific experiences themselves and have confused culture and Islam. Or people's lives, you know, particular countries in Islam, and they will then use that to kind of rebel back against Islam. You have some people, they'll come from some weird sect or group, you know, some like with the most strange ideas, you know, and again, all of them will, you know, put this thing out, because the idea is your first reaction when someone comes to talk to you about this is, that's ridiculous, Islam is the truth, you haven't tasted the sweetness of Iman. To which they say, I've been where you were, I thought what you thought, and I then left Islam. And that's, you know, something that people have to be aware of, the facts, again, the facts of the matter. And again, be cautious, you know, when they are dealing with other people and when
just
they
on the
expose
same
these
point,
kind of things.
people leaving Islam, the Prophet ﷺ told us that towards the end of the days, that holding on to your deen will be like holding on to a hot coal, and that people will leave Islam, actually, you know. This was something the Prophet ﷺ prophesied. So it's not something that should shock us that, you know, somehow, oh my God, you know, Islam is maybe, why are people leaving Islam? Maybe it's not, you know, correct. Because that's what happens. A lot of times, I've noticed that when people find out that people are leaving Islam, or they heard that someone left Islam, or they meet some ex-Muslims, they're like, they get doubtful just from the news, right? Because they're just expecting that everyone should convert to Islam, right? That somehow, you know, everyone's going to be a Muslim. But I always tell them, why are you sad? Or why you know, this is what the Prophet ﷺ warned us about and told us, that these things will happen, that people will, you know, go to wake up as a believer and go to sleep as a disbeliever, and go to sleep a believer and wake up as a disbeliever. You know, subhanAllah, it's something that the Prophet ﷺ told us that it will happen. And going back to what you were saying, I was recently had to deal with another friend's aunt, who, again, for some reason, it seems that these, you know, if you're an ex-Muslim and you start giving some lectures or write some books, you become very, very popular, you know. So this person, you know, just nonsense what they're talking about, like Jesus came to them and they're flying on his back, and, you know, the moon is following them, and people are actually listening to this. That's what, you know, I'm not surprised that they're nonsense. I'm surprised at the people, the nonsense that they're listening to and believing in, you know. And we live in a very modern society where, you know, we have access to information. We're taught how to think. Islam teaches you how to think, but then you're told that, oh, you know, Jesus came and took me on his back, and all of a sudden I should believe that, you know, that is something amazing. Or, you know, they have a whole series of movies where so-called Muslims had, you know, dreamt of Jesus. You know what I mean? And somehow, you know, that is somehow, you know, they should become Christian because of that, you know. Ridiculous stuff, to the point that one person said that he prayed istikhara, whether he should leave Islam or not. And in his dream, he dreamt of Jesus, so he left Islam. I mean, ridiculous. But the more shocking thing is that they have an audience.
For sure.
They have an audience.
We just earlier we were talking about this on the topic of people giving ridiculous proofs. We talked about people validating the Quran based on the Bible.
Right.
So saying that I can prove to you the Quran is wrong because it contradicts the Bible.
Right.
Here, and here.
It's like what?
And you turn around and say, okay, so the Quran is wrong because it contradicts the Bible, not that the Bible is wrong because it contradicts the Quran. And just let's look at factually which one is historically more accurate,
right,
and which one historically has a source that is proven and a proven record of preservation.
Right.
And you claim that the Quran is wrong because it contradicts the Bible. But subhanAllah, it's taking advantage of people's ignorance. It's taking advantage of people's weaknesses, people's desires, people's feelings, people's emotions, and just manipulating people and taking advantage. And in some ways, there's nothing new to that. That's the way the shaitan always works with people, of taking over someone's vulnerabilities and looking whether that vulnerability is ignorance, whether that vulnerability is maybe bad treatment at the hands of some Muslims, whether it is down to some sort of cultural misunderstanding of what Islam is, and just taking advantage of that and playing on it to basically bring out that person to the place where they want them to be.
SubhanAllah. And the worst argument that I've heard is when they try to validate their belief from the Quran. They say the Bible is correct because the Quran says, for example, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. So they'll take that as the people of the reminder, or the people of the book, they'll say, and then they'll say, see, look, it's telling you to come to us and ask us. SubhanAllah. Anyway, we ran out of time. I think we need to continue because there's so much on this. So inshallah, next time you come on, I'd love to continue this topic, inshallah. And try to spread these videos, inshallah, to as many people as possible, because it is very important that people, we have some of the ulama, some of the mashayikh who start maybe seeing these things, and more of us should reach out to them to get them involved, in dealing with some of these issues, subhanAllah. Because being very fair, and I've spent a lot of time refuting a lot of these, and now we're trying to focus a lot on quality. And I do want to recommend everyone to go to icraa.org to see some of our articles. But when you look around at the responses that are out there online, they're very, very substandard, and sometimes actually they're saying the wrong things Islamically, and that can cause an issue. Okay, you didn't go to kufr, but you went to...
For sure. The wrong response can just ruin, because when you're at that stage of vulnerability where you're just feeling really vulnerable, you're waiting, okay, I've got the Islamic response. You've got a one-time shot to convince that person that what they've heard is wrong. And if that's wasted by listening to someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, then the reality is that you're going to lose that person.
Jazakallah khair, inshallah. We'll see you next time.
Inshallah.
We'll continue with this.
Inshallah.
Jazakallah khair for you watching. We'll see you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend on you, he says, on who spend in good cause. Good deeds are opportunities, sparkling bright and true, raising you in the sight of Allah and adorning Al-Jannah for you. So rush to earn his reward, don't forget.